Okay, the meeting is now being live streamed and recorded. Madam Chair, I'll turn the program over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. Can we do a quick introduction of the staff and guests that are on our program today? I'm Mary Creek. I'm a dairy farmer in Hagerstown, Washington County. I'm glad to see everyone here. Steve, you want to take it from there?
Sure. Let's defer first to the members of the MARBIDCO Board of Directors. Paul Goinger from the University of Maryland.
If I can find the unmute button. Paul Geringer, faculty member, University of Maryland.
Great. John?
John Jastrzemski here. Frederick County, retired professor from forestry at Allegheny College. Been on MARBIDCO now for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years.
Great. You're also our vice chair. Sarah?
I'm Sarah O'Haron. I am the founder and one of the owners of Black Ankle Vineyards in Mount Airy, Maryland.
Great. Don?
I am the executive director of the Maryland Food Center Authority, and I'm Don Darnall.
Great. AC?
ACL Ray, City of Crisfield, Maryland, here in beautiful Lower Eastern Shore.
Doug Lipton?
Yeah, hi. Senior economist with the National Marine Fisheries Service and emeritus professor, University of Maryland.
Jinhee?
Junhee Kim, Associate Dean and Associate Director for University of Maryland Extension.
Great to see you this morning. Steve?
Steve Conley, Deputy Secretary, Maryland Department of Agriculture.
Wayne Richard?
Morning, Wayne Richard, Regional Vice President of Ag Lending for Horizon Farm Credit. Apologize for the camera being off, but I'm not in a great place for being on video calls.
No worries. We're glad to have you. Dan Ryder? Dan has stepped away from his camera, I believe. Mark Krebs?
Mark Krebs, CFO of Farmers and Merchants Bank.
Great. And you're currently serving as our Secretary Treasurer of the MARBIDCO Board.
That's true.
And other than Dan, did we catch all the members of the board?
Yes.
All right. Let's start then with the staff. Stacy?
Stacy Kabofsik, Senior Programs Manager.
Brittany?
Brittany Rawlings, Financial Program Specialist.
And Brittany is a very recent graduate of Farm Credit University. She was down in Charlotte, North Carolina last week for her final session and the graduation ceremony. So congrats to you, Brittany. Brian?
Hey, Brian Cadden, Financial Program Specialist.
And I think Sierra is also there. Sierra, you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. Sierra Chris, Financial Programs Associate, MARBIDCO.
And I'm Steve McHenry, Executive Director. So good to see everybody this morning. Madam Chair, you want to move into the minutes at this point?
I think you forgot Tina, Jill.
I'm not,
Tina,
no.
Jill.
There you go.
And
I'm sorry.
Dan also said that his camera and microphone aren't working, but he can hear fine.
Oh, okay.
So I think Jill's on the phone with Victoria. I saw her name pop up on the telephone, so she may be trying to get into the meeting. And good morning, Tina Wilkins, Senior Accounting Coordinator. And it looks like Charlotte just joined as well.
Charlotte, good morning. We weren't expecting you. Glad you could make it.
I gotta leave at 10:30, so sorry.
Okay. I think Victoria needs to leave a little early too, if she can get on. And Dan, we're glad to hear that you're listening, and you can communicate electronically with Tina if you need to say something. All righty. I think we got everybody now. My apologies to my team members for forgetting them. Jill is out there somewhere.
All right,
So,
great to have everyone. Okay, we'll move forward then with the approval of the previous board meeting minutes. Are there any questions with that, or do we need a little time to look them over? Okay, I'd entertain a motion for approval and acceptance if there are no questions.
Move to approve the minutes.
All right,
Steve Connolly, second.
Thank you. Any or all those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. So let's go ahead then and move to the financial, budgetary and legislative items.
Okay. Let's start, if we can, Tina, with the FY24 year-to-date budget review. You all received information relating to that. So we are well along in the fiscal year now. I believe we're 83% of the way along at this point. I think Tina was going to put up the budget summary.
Jill, can you give me sharing capabilities, please?
While she's looking for that capability, let me tell you that on the income side of the ledger, we have met or very close to meeting all of our projected income streams, including about double reverted and carryover project funds. And that includes projects that we approved and the projects didn't close for whatever reason. So those funds get put back into the budget. Core program appropriations came in at 8.3 million for the year. That included an extra 6 million for our core programs, given the heavy loan demand we had a year ago. We were running way ahead of normal 18 months ago. And so the legislature was very kind to make up what we thought was going to be a shortfall for the fiscal 24. As you will see in a minute, core loans have not run as we thought they would have at this time a year ago. Can you go back up, please? So looking again at the income, we again received $435,000 for the aggregation program. We have a like amount of money in the coming year. To be the last year for that program. In terms of principal repayments from our core program, you can see we're a little over 3 million, which is ahead of what we projected. And our specialty loan programs have come in just about on target at this point to 83% of the year, having now progressed. Interest income from loans is coming in right as expected. We'll probably be at 100% by the end of the fiscal year. Program income just a little over what we projected. We received a $4 million appropriation for our next generation programs this year. We will not have any next gen program money next year because we think we have about enough funding for 3 years based on what we have in hand to date. We also had $376,000 in a next gen payoff project come in during the year. Some miscellaneous minor other income, and then some targeted state grants. Principally here, we're talking about the Waterman's Microloan Program, the Worcester Shucking House Loan Program, and Tina, I'm missing something else there.
Did we get SMATIC funding?
Oh, yes, we received a little bit of SMATIC funding for the Equity Incentive Grant Program. And there's something else there which is escaping my memory. But anyway, we're in pretty good shape on the income side. In terms of the operating income, and again, this is the number that's going to become increasingly important to you and me and the rest of the team as we move into the period after fiscal 25 when we're basically on our own for most of our programming. You can see here that we projected 1.7 million in the budget in operating income, and we're at 1.6 million today, or 95% of what we were projecting. So we're on target for operating income for this year. And if you'll scroll down, and if you look at the summary there for operating expenses, 1.2 million. So, or excuse me, 1.6 million for the year, 1.3 million currently. So, where operating incomes are exceeding operating revenues in a way that's what we like to see. In terms of the expenses, things running pretty much as projected. As you'll see later when we talk about the FY25 budget, our health insurance and related benefits have exceeded projections a bit and will next year for sure. The outreach, promotion, travel, and training budget is also over. We are fully staffed today, I'm pleased to tell you. You'll remember we were operating with a shortage of team members for a couple of years previous to this year. And by September of this past year, we were fully staffed again, which meant that folks had to be trained. And we had many more people going to meetings. So we were over in the travel and training budget by some amount. And our outreach and promotion expenditures are also included in that line and are, I think, being fully utilized to date. Now, turning over to the programmatic expenditures, you'll see here that under the core loans, we are not running anywhere close to what we had budgeted. We had budgeted a total of $11 million at the beginning of the year. Again, we thought that was a realistic expectation of what we would need based on the year before when we were running at $1 million a month. For 12 straight months, we were doing $1 million a month. So there was in the prior calendar year, not fiscal year, we were running at $12 million. And when we discontinued the Mr. Biff Direct Loan program last May, which we thought was going to be for a temporary period while we awaited the new Mr. Biff Loan participation program to launch, we lost about a quarter of our Mr. Biff lending. So we reopened the direct loan program last September. We obviously have received some direct loan requests. You see there 2.8 million. We just approved another project of about $1 million, 150,000 or so. We had, I believe, 1.2 million in new Mr. Biff loans that were approved that actually withdrew. Every year we have some number of project requests that we go all the way through the process, and you think you're on the way to settlement and something happens, borrower changes his mind, something else happens, and that was the case there. So we thought we'd be about $4 million, $4.5 million today. We're at just under 3 million. But we are projecting to be close to $6 million in the core category by the end of the year with deals that we are pending currently and that we think might come in. So I'll talk more about that later. In terms of the specialty loan programs, not as much activity as we would have expected. We did do a couple of Southern Maryland revolving loans during the year. We did a smaller number than the previous year in the Waterman's microloan programs. We have one Oyster Shucking House loan that's been approved. That's our first one in that new program. So I'm going to talk more about that program in a minute because legislation passed on that program as well as the Waterman's microloan program. So running a little bit behind what we were hoping to do in both the core loans and specialty loans. But we can talk more about that later in the agenda. In terms of the grants, things are going fairly well. The Wood Products Industry Equity Investment Program, the WIPI program, went very well this year. I want to thank Dan Ryder for his help and the other folks at the Forest Service. They were instrumental in helping us make some good decisions in that program. We've expended or approved $630,000, although we just had one applicant yesterday tell us they're not going to be able to proceed forward with that project. So we have $50,000 more to grant out next year in next year's WIPI program. And we did receive another $500,000 appropriation for that program for next year. And we did 190,000 or so in livestock processing equipment grants last year. So anyway, we're doing rather better in the specialty grant category. We did just under what we're expecting to do in the core grants there. And finally, the next generation programs have been moving along somewhat under budget. Allison's going to give a report on that in a bit. So she had to make a hospital run this morning with her grandmother, but she should be on shortly. So that's where we are for the year. We had projected that we could do as much as $21 million or so all in during the fiscal year. Again, budgeting a very large amount of our specialty loan program funds, as well as a very large expenditure projected for the core loans. But we're going to end up, as you'll see later, doing less than half of that in this fiscal year. But right now we're carrying a balance of $16.2 million in the budget. So that's where we are today.
Steve,
You'll see our year-end numbers when we do the fiscal 25 discussion.
Dan
You have
Ryder.
a question?
Yeah, Dan Ryder has a question in the chat. He says, I was going to ask about that 50K. Did I hear that those dollars roll over into WIPI for fiscal year 25, correct?
The answer is yes. Dollars in that program stay in that program and will roll over to the next cycle. Okay. So that's the budget to date. We can dig into it a little bit more, I think, Tina, with the programmatic activity. So some of what I was just saying is reflected here. We just approved this week a $120,000 agribusiness equipment working capital loan. We have 3 or 4 projects pending that we know of, including, we think, our first loan participation loan. So we'll talk about how that's going in a moment with Horizon Farm Credit. You see the activity with core loans, specialty loans. Again, it's always interesting. People go through the process and get approved and then don't take the money that they've been approved. And obviously it's a lot of work for us to do that, but that's the nature of the beast. So Tina, you can keep scrolling. And you can see there on the summary of the grants, 32 grants approved, 42 applications, 5 were denied, 5 were withdrawn. You can see the programmatic activity there. And then core grants, you can see how we're doing there. We're going to discuss later, continuing for another year with the cold storage grants. We've been getting a lot of calls from potential applicants in that program, so there continues to be a need. So I'm going to recommend another year of funding for that program, in addition to the other programs that we have historically offered. And then finally, you can see there the next generation program. So that's an overview of where we are today with our programs. You can take that down unless there are questions. Alrighty. Very briefly, we're going to talk about the loan loss reserve and the average loan portfolio interest rate. You can see there that our loan loss reserve is 2.61% today. That's very close to what it's been in recent times. Our actual loan losses are something under 2%, but using the analysis that we have set up in our loan administration system, we risk rate each individual loan, and this is the aggregate of all the individual risk ratings. So in order not to overstate the equity position on our balance sheet, we have a loan loss reserve. So that's a pretty good number, I think. A well-managed small business revolving loan program can typically expect to have 5 to 7% loan losses. So we're definitely running under that for sure. The other thing I wanted to point out here was our average loan portfolio, our interest rate, which is going up, thankfully. We're now at 3.9%. This is the interest rate today with all the loans that we currently have booked. So this is the revenue, the operating revenue that's being spun off for us from all of the loans that we currently have outstanding. You may remember that just prior to the start of the pandemic, this figure was at 4.25%. The board has established a goal of having a 4% average interest rate. And during the pandemic, we wrote down the interest expense for about 130 Mr. Biff loans to help those borrowers during a difficult time. And our average interest rate had fallen to just under 3.4%, if I remember correctly, Tina. And since that time, it has gradually gone up. So over the last couple, maybe 2.5 years, this has been increasing. Where last time we met, it was at 3.75% roughly. You can see now it's at 3.9%. So things are trending in the right direction. I expect we'll be over 4, if not at the next meeting, the meeting after that. So good news there. Okay, any questions about that? Moving on then. Another number that we look at, just because it's kind of interesting, Tina, if you'll go down, please, is the average, is the amount and the average of early loan payoffs. Quite a number of loans have paid off early. And you can see this year, 5 loans have paid off early, amounting to something over 1.2 million that came in ahead of schedule. So that money revolves right back into mostly our core loan program funding. There's some specialty loan funds in here as well. So that's money that we immediately have available to relend. So you can see there during the pandemic period and just before, when interest rates were very low, we had quite a number of loans pay off early. And then it's gone back now down to a more normal level. You can see the average of the early payoff being $251,000. You know, those are going to be Mr. Biff loans at that level primarily. But you can see the scroll up just a little bit. You can see there, this is from the beginning. All the loans have paid off early and by programmatic type. So 119 Mr. Biff loans have paid off early ahead of schedule. 61 oyster farming loans, self-agricultural loans have paid off early, etc. Including 34 pandemic adjustment loans have paid off early. Tina, are we done now entirely with the pandemic adjustment loans? We're very close.
We have 3 that are set to pay off in December of this year. Final
So-
three.
Yes, we're very close to wrapping up some of our pandemic related work. Okay, any questions about that? All right. Moving along then, I wanted to give you all an update on the budgetary situation, first for the state. You may remember our last meeting, some discussion of the immediate fiscal environment and then projected shortfalls by fiscal 28. The General Assembly, the governor, of course, submitted a balanced budget with some proposed reductions and tweaks. General Assembly ultimately dealt with it. There was some disagreement between the House and the Senate about whether to raise significant new revenues this year or not to deal with a projected general fund shortfall of $3 billion in fiscal 28. Again, the general fund consists of $26 billion in the budget that was approved for fiscal 25. Overall budget of $63 billion for the state of Maryland in fiscal 25. So $3 billion short on the general fund budget 3 years from now. So there was some thinking on the part of the leadership in the House that should deal with the revenue challenge more immediately. The Senate didn't agree with that. The governor didn't agree with that. So basically, just some minor revenue increases on the transportation side of the ledger. Transportation matters are dealt with separately. There's this thing called the Transportation Trust Fund. It is also $3 billion short of what is projected to be needed for expenditures related to the transportation system in the state. So there was some tweaking with vehicle registrations, increases for owners of electric vehicles, et cetera. But there was no major increase in taxes related to either the general fund or the transportation fund. But next year, it's going to be a different challenge for the state. Already the word is state agencies are starting to be much more cautious in their spending, their discretionary spending. And the environment next year is going to be rather more challenging. But good news for us is we were fully funded. We have the final appropriation of $2.3 million coming in fiscal 25 for the core programs. Good news there. We have, I think, could be the final year funding for the Certified Local Farm Enterprise Aggregation Grant Program. So another year of funding for that. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Waterman's Microloan Program received its $500,000 mandatory appropriation for that program. We have one more year of funding after fiscal 25 for that program. Legislature also passed legislation related to that program, which I'll talk about in a minute. The WIPI program was funded at $500,000. That's the Wood Products Industry Equity Investment Grant Program. And there's $400,000 in the Livestock Processing Equipment Grant Program. So we had allocated this year's appropriation of $500,000 fiscal 24 to go along with our new livestock processing loan program. You may remember we were receiving a $3.8 million grant from USDA, which we're matching with $1.3 million of core funds to create a $5 million livestock processing loan program. We have an application pending in that program, but we've not yet approved any loan awards in that under that program. But we have some matching money to go with the loans to incentivize equity contributions for those larger livestock processing projects. So good news there. We're well funded going into this fiscal year. It's also probably good news to the budget writers that our core program funds are not going to be needed next year, since we do believe we're going to be self-sustaining going forward for quite a while. So good news there. Charlotte, who may have departed, she's receiving another $9.1 million in the Rural Maryland Council budget, which is what they were hoping for. SMATIC, our partners in Southern Maryland, received $900,000, and legislation actually passed. It's going to raise that to $1 million starting next year. So they're very happy about that. Kind of on the downside, the Mel Nolan Woodland Incentives Fund had received a pretty good increase via legislation that was enacted a couple of years ago to $1 million. And unfortunately, that program is being cut in half going forward. So it was quadrupled in size. Now it's being cut back, so it's double in size of what it previously was. But that's a nice program for our forest landowners to take advantage of. So those are some of the budget highlights. I'm happy to try to take questions about that, but then I want to talk about a couple of bills. Anybody have any questions about our budget or the budgetary situation? All right, seeing none, let me mention that House Bill 120 and Senate Bill 32 passed, which not only altered the Waterman's microloan program, but it also made some good changes to the oyster shucking house loan program. The bill came in dealing only with the Waterman's program, and as introduced, the bill would allow commercial fishermen who are licensed by the Potomac River Fisheries Commission to participate in the program. It was entirely an oversight from the original introduction of the bill that there was a separate class of commercial watermen that are not licensed directly by DNR. So we think there is as many as 300 watermen who could be newly eligible theoretically by the change in this law. So they're now covered. But as part of that, you may recall from our last meeting that we wanted the ability to make larger loans under the program. So that was granted. Now the size of the loans is entirely in your purview. Previously under the law, loans had to be between $7,000 and $15,000. So the legislature struck that provision, giving this board the authority to set the level of the loan making, and I'm going to have some recommendations on that later in the agenda. The bill also tweaks the eligibility for the oyster shucking house loan program. The original bill, which was passed as part of an omnibus oyster-related legislation, with a real intent to try to see an increase in the numbers of oysters growing in the Chesapeake Bay for water quality, as well as both ecological restoration as well as economic activity relative to the oysters. We were provided a $1 million appropriation this year to set up that program. Maximum loan is $250,000 for oyster processing facilities. The proviso in the statute limited the funding to $25,000 for each full-time job created or retained. And we had a number of calls from folks saying, I don't have more than 1 or 2 full-time employees. We hire people seasonally. So after talking with the original bill sponsor, Senator Sarah Elkworth, about it after our budget hearing in the Senate, I made her aware of the problem, and she had the foresight of mind to, when the Waterman's bill was on the floor, she offered an amendment with input from myself and Senator Bailey, the bill sponsor, to tweak that program so we can now make a loan for $10,000 for each seasonal full-time job created or retained. So that's a 3-month full-time position, which is much more typical in that industry to have seasonal employees working full-time, but then not working typically in the summer. It's more of a wintertime activity, which of course comports to the wild oyster fishery when you they're generally fishing in the winter months for oysters in the wild fishery. So that bill passed. I mentioned the SMATIC bill also passed, increasing their funding. One bill that you all had also suggested we might want to weigh in on, since I had been involved in a work group of legislators and stakeholders, dealt with the problem of assessment increases for especially value-added and equine operations. Beginning about 4 years ago or so, the Department of Assessments and Taxation started increasing the assessments on farm properties where either new agricultural buildings were being constructed or existing buildings were being substantially renovated to include tasting rooms, bathrooms, things like that. And the department's interpretation of statute said that that was a commercial activity. For some reason, in their minds, agriculture is not commercial. So they started reassessing those properties with fairly dramatic increases in assessment. So the issue's been kicking around in the legislature for the last 3 sessions. We thought this might be the year. And for reasons that are a little difficult to explain, it was decided that it would be best to wait another year to deal with this topic. One of the reasons for that is there's been a change in leadership at the Department of Assessments and Taxation. So there's some thinking that new leadership there might make a difference. But in order for SDAC to change its current practice, it's going to need to have its regulations revised, we think. So it's not clear yet whether it can act on its own by issuing revised regulations or whether legislation is going to be needed next year. So stay tuned on that issue. This has particularly affected wineries, on-farm wineries, breweries, creameries, and equine operations. All right, so that's the legislative update. Any questions about anything I just said? All righty, seeing none, let's move over to core loans. And I did want to report, and I think, Wayne, are you still on? You are? We have made a tremendous amount of progress in the last 3 months on the loan participation program. You might recall that exactly almost a year ago, we decided because of our staffing shortage, and we had especially a key staff member retire who oversaw our Mr. Biff loan program, direct loan program. Yeah, we needed to move in a potentially different direction with our partnership lending with commercial banks. And we set down a path to do what 3 of our sister ag finance authorities do in other states. And we thought it was going to take 2 or 3 months to do. It has taken about a year. But the good news is that we are on the cusp of actually doing our very first loan participation project. I provided for you the master loan participation agreement that we have in place today with Horizon Farm Credit. This ended up being a much longer and involved process than we ever imagined. I want to thank a now retired attorney with Horizon Farm Credit, who actually at Paul Geringer's Ag Law Conference last November, he and I had the happenstance to meet and discuss this program, and we immediately were able to devise a way within the regulations of the farm credit system to actually design a loan participation program that would work for farm credit associations here in this area. So thanks to his help, we were able to get approval from not only him, but also attorneys at Ag First Bank which is the regional funding bank for all the farm credit associations that operate between Pennsylvania and Florida. So we now have an agreement that they are comfortable with that will, we presume, work for not only Horizon Farm Credit, but also Colonial Farm Credit and Farm Credit of Virginia, which serve various parts of the state of Maryland. So that is in place. Our attorney is good. Their legal counsel is good. We've been working through the mechanics of how it would actually happen. And again, to recap, the benefit of this is that we will participate with our funding in essentially a subordinate lien fashion to do what we were doing in Mr. Direct Loan Program. But now we will be permitting the senior lender to do all of the loan servicing for both their loan and our loan. So once we go through the normal process that we have for loan approval, we will be turning everything over to the commercial lender. They will be doing the billings. They will be doing the loan servicing. There's a problem, they will be doing the litigation. We will just be collecting our check for what we're owed. So I think it's going to work out very well. The reports from our sister agencies is they just love it. And so we're on the cusp of I think doing our first project. Wayne, I want to thank you for your help. You've been instrumental in this. And did we lose Wayne? I was going to ask Wayne to make a comment. I think we lost him. Well, he and I have been having lots of back and forth on the fine tuning of how everything is going to work. What we're planning to do once we have done a deal with Horizon is to then reach out again to Colonial Farm Credit and Farm Credit of Virginia's to get them up and running with the direct loan program. That's going to take, 2 or 3 months easily, I expect. And then following that, we intend to launch the program with the other commercial lenders in the state. That will require a different loan participation agreement, probably something akin closer to what you may have seen, 11 months ago, which is something that's closer to what's being used in the other states. And so we plan to do a series of outreach efforts, have some informational webinars, that sort of thing, to get them up to speed on what would be involved. Don't want to immediately cut off the direct loan program. I think we learned from that experience before. So we'll keep that open for a good while longer, but we'll begin to make the transition to the loan participation program.
Steve,
and,
I don't know. Victoria has her hand raised. I
can't see that. So Victoria, did you have a question?
She just put her hand down. Maybe she
didn't. Okay. We're going to be charging 4.25% into that program, so a little less than what we're charging currently for in the first step of the direct loan program. Just for your recollection, 4 3/4 in the first step of the direct loan program for 3 years. Then it steps up to 5 1/4 for the next 3 years, and then it currently is 5 3/4 for the remaining term of the loan, with a balloon typically at 10 years if the amortization is longer than 15. In the new program, there'll be a fixed rate of 4 1/4% for MARBIDCO. We've creatively devised a way to go to a 15-year term. And if the amortization is longer, then the loan would balloon. And the bank is obligated to repay us at the end of the 15th year, irrespective of any relationship it has with the borrower. So the bank is on the hook for that balloon payment at that point. The bank also has the option of charging up to 75 basis points over and above our 425 basis point charge. So they can charge an extra 0.75% to cover their servicing costs under the loan participation arrangement. I think Horizon's planning to do that And I expect that many lenders will, but it's optional on their part. We don't tell them they have to do that. So the combined interest rate then in that example would be 5% fixed for the life of the Mr. Bill loan, which again is a loan being issued by the partnering lender bank. So we're out of the game of having to service those loans and do the debt collection, that sort of thing. Happy to take questions on that. And I don't think Wayne has returned, so do appreciate Wayne's help with that. Okay. As we mentioned earlier, we've done now 7 direct loans this year. Actually, 6 direct loans and 3 agribusiness equipment working capital loans so far this year. We have not done any vineyard, hop yard, or orchard fruit planting loans this year. We normally do about 1 or 2 a year. And then we haven't done any forestry equipment or working capital loans this year. Again, normally do about 1, sometimes 2 a year. So that's it for the core programs. We actually have a new core program in the offing that I put under the wrong category when I was putting the agenda together. And I guess I'm going to talk about it now since it actually fits under core loans. And that's the proposed new large animal veterinarian loan assistance program. Tina, you want to put that up? I'm going out of order here on the agenda if you're following along.
And Steve, Dan had a question. What happens to the unexpended budget for the vineyard and forestry program?
Again, with our core loan funds, all of that, those are funds that are internal now to MARBIDCO, and all of those funds remain under MARBIDCO control. So unlike state agencies that have to revert their general funds on June 30th, all funds that MARBIDCO has are retained by MARBIDCO. The core program funds are MARBIDCO directed funds entirely within the discretion of this board. And then we have specialty loan and specialty grant programs that are funded either by other agencies or directly by the General Assembly for targeted specific activities. Those funds stay within the account set up for those programs, so they can only be used in the way that the funder envisioned. But those funds, again, are held by MARBIDCO. They do not revert back to the state treasurer. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Yes.
Okay. Here's a program that we've designed recently to deal with a need that is facing rural communities across the country. Increasingly, there's been a shortage of veterinarians servicing cattle, horses, and other large animals. And a part of the reason for that is it's expensive to become a veterinarian. Very often it costs, very often students in vet school are taking on debt in excess of $300,000 to complete their educations. If you're a veterinarian, you can make probably twice the income servicing pet animals, small animals at, physical facilities where you don't have to drive around in a truck and spend lots of time driving to service large animals in the field or in the barn. And 3 of our sister states have actually received funds from their state governments to set up grant programs for student loan debt forgiveness for large animal vets, for vets that agree to work with large animals and food animals. We don't have the grant funding available for such a program, but in talking with a couple of vets recently, and also the staff and the vet board and folks at MDA, we think it could be beneficial to create a loan program for large animal vets that would provide loans of up to $25,000 to $100,000. Tina, want to scroll down a little bit, please? And such a if you go up just a little bit. Stop. Here are the conditions for which we would be able to make a loan. Again, the intent here is to provide help for a vet who agrees to service large animals in Maryland, but not necessarily exclusively in Maryland, but in majority of the time in Maryland. They must reside in Maryland for the period of the loan. They must have a current sizable student loan debt obligation. We're suggesting $50,000. Although again, a good many vets are carrying debts in the $200,000 to $300,000 range currently. So the principal thing a large animal vet often needs is a truck with a cab, with equipment, ultrasound machines, x-ray machines. They need to have a list of medications and vaccines, things of that sort on the truck. And so what we're proposing to do here is to create a $100,000 max loan, charge a fixed interest rate of 4.5%. We're sort of internally debating around, we certainly can take a lien on the truck. We can probably take a UCC lien on major equipment. Liens on medicines and things don't make sense. But what we're proposing is to create a loan program for these. I don't want to say they're all young vets. They could very easily be middle-aged vets that are carrying large amounts of student loan debt currently. But create a loan program for them. If you'll scroll down just a little bit more, you can see there the terms that we're suggesting for these loans. Again, these would be loans not to exceed 95% of fair market value, with the applicant paying for at least 10% of the items proposed to be purchased. So that's what we're proposing. Again, the response has been very positive for those I've spoken with. The vet board is actually going to take this up on Thursday just for informational purposes, but the staff there thought it was a great idea. So I'm happy to take any questions about this. I know in talking with our chair, she's been very fortunate in Western Maryland to have a dairy vet service centered in Hagerstown that serves the region. But in talking with folks in other parts of the state, there's definitely a shortage of large animal vets right now. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Steve, I apologize for not getting back to you. I did take a minute and talk with our vet practice about it, and they said that they thought that it would be an encouraging thing that would help even established practices like themselves to be able to recruit people to come in, when they're looking for new people to join the practice, to say, hey, you come to us, we've got this available in Maryland that would help you out. So they seemed pretty positive about it when I spoke with them.
Right. Any other comments? Steve Conley, did you have a comment?
Well, without a doubt, there's a shortage of veterinarians, especially large animal vets. And I think that anything we can do to encourage more food animal vets out there, we should do that. No slight against the horse people, but I really think that there's a real need with, large animal vets that are dealing with livestock.
I should tell you too, there was legislation that passed this year, which takes effect, I believe, on October 1st, that is going to let both veterinarians as well as physicians that have signed non-compete contracts with their employers, those will be rendered invalid. So, it's possible you may have some younger vets, starting out on their, or going out on their own, here over the next 6 months or so.
I was just going to chime in. I feel like this is exactly what one of the many things for which we exist, which is trying to find a need in agriculture in the state that's not being filled and trying to jump in and do something about it. So I think it sounds great.
Okay.
Steve, do you need anything from us, like a motion or?
Yep. Need a motion and a second to approve the proposed design.
Okay, do we hear a motion to accept this?
I'll move Sarah O'Haron.
Okay, thank you,
And
Sarah. Second.
And Steve Connolly will second.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the motion to move forward with this new program, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tina, you can take it down. And while she's doing that, Wayne Richard is back for a few minutes. Wayne, I was giving you kudos for the loan participation program. Did you have any insight that you wanted to, did you hear any of what I said?
I heard you talking about it, and then I lost everything, and it took me like 15 minutes to get back in. So apologize for that. No, we are certainly moving forward. We have a pilot right now. So on our side, we've got all of our policies and procedures roughed out. We've got a pilot that we're literally just waiting for the customer to give us some financials, which we expect any day now. And then we're going to roll that pilot through. I'm sure we'll find something along the path that will lead us to have to tweak or change something. But it'll give us a good pulse on where we are with everything. And then the intent is to roll this out completely on July 1 at Horizon and of course with MARBIDCO. So it's taken a long time, but we've moved very quickly here in the last probably 2-3 months, made a lot of progress. And I think this pilot loan is going to really let us know what we've missed, what gaps we might have, and really help propel us to get this thing moving.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for your diligence here, especially once we had the legal breakthrough. So appreciate it very much.
Yep.
All right. Jumping back into the agenda then, I think we're on to core and specialty grant programs. I did have the Maryland Producer Cold Storage Equipment Grant Program on the docket for approval today. We've offered this in a couple of iterations since the pandemic. Last year we had a design that offered up to a $2,000 grant on a 50-50 basis for both producers and farm producers and watermen. And we've been getting a number of phone calls from folks. And I'm going to propose that we again offer it at least one more time. We'll be rethinking grant programs that are funded from MARBIDCO core funds after next year. But I'd like to recommend that we go ahead and do that. This is budgeted, by the way, in the FY24 budget. So we probably can wait till then if we just approve the FY24 budget. We'll consider that approved, or you can pass a motion to say offer this again now. Either way, it doesn't matter to me.
Unless we hear anything, we'll just move on and include it as part of the final budget.
Very good. We have the WIPI program here, which, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be included in next year's budget. I want to thank Dan Ryder and his colleagues at the Forest Service. They were instrumental in helping us think through how to ferret out the worthiness of the applications we received. So we are working now on a survey to the grantees from last year to try to get a better handle on what their needs are going forward. That may allow us to maybe tweak a little bit what we would propose to do in the cycle that would come up in the early fall. But I don't know. Dan, I know you can't speak. Is there anything that you would want to say about it? He is saying that Whippy is a good fit for the wood industry. So we certainly believe it is. It implements a recommendation of a large report that was issued about 3 years ago. So we're fortunate to have these funds. I'm hoping we can keep them in the budget going forward, but I think it's going to become perhaps increasingly difficult given the state's fiscal condition. But hopefully we can keep it going for a while. So any questions about that? All righty. We did have some activity in the livestock processing equipment grant program. We've got that again included in the budget for next year. Some activity in the cost share program. By the way, I think I'm stealing Stacy's thunder. She was going to talk about some of this. Stacy, did you want to talk about the beginning farmer grants before you talk about the aggregation program?
I mean, I can just say that we did approved 9, and these are just like small grants of $1,000, $750, or $500. So we dispersed $6,750. And on the food aggregation grant, you remember we partnered with MDA to provide a non-federal match to applicants to their USDA Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant Program. And we approved 6 applicants for $645,192. And now we just have to wait to see if those projects end up getting approved by USDA or by MDA and then by USDA. And we should know that about mid-August. Did you want me to talk about the food aggregation grant the next round?
Yes, if you don't mind. And
Sure.
by the way, I did send something else out to you last evening related to this.
Okay. So we sent out a new application to our grant review team that includes Don and Paul and Sarah, AC, and it also includes Karen Fedor from MDA. And we have about $1 million, a little over that, to fund projects. And then depending on if those 6 that we approved, whether they get funded, we could have more come in. So basically the small scale farmer aggregation grant would be grants between $25,000 and $100,000, a 20% match, and include at least 4 certified local farm and certified Chesapeake invasive species providers. Again, that's the program with MDA where if you have to have a nutrient management plan and you can become a certified farmer. We changed the definition of what an eligible applicant can be just to, I think, cast a wider net. So it's basically, we called it an agricultural product aggregation and distribution entity. And this would be an entity including a farming operation aggregator that's working with at least 4 farms and has the capacity to expand to meet institutional and wholesale demand. Or it could be also a legally organized farm cooperative. And then we also have the large scale public institution aggregation grant. And this would be grants between $150,000 and $300,000. I think last year it went up to $400,000, but we moved it back to $300,000. And this applicants could include a public entity like county government, municipality, community college, university, county school system, or a rural regional council. And they have to plan to either primarily be the aggregation center, or they would be the buyer. So they could be either. And they also have to provide a commitment to purchase from at least 4 certified local farm and certified Chesapeake invasive species providers. And the deadline to apply for this is going to be October 15th in the fall.
Tina, you have this to put up.
I don't really have any more to comment on it.
If you can scroll down to the small scale, you passed it, so that the board can see what we're talking about here. So as Stacy just mentioned, small scale grants between 25,000 and 100,000. At least 4 certified local farms involved, and then the large scale 150 to 300,000, down from 400,000 last year. We're down to our last million or so available in the program, including the 435,000 will be appropriated next year. So I think, I think folks are starting to understand how this works, and hopefully we can get some good projects in. So this is what we're planning to do this year. I don't know if we need a motion to approve. I guess we need a motion to approve this offering as we tweaked it for this coming year. Unless there are questions. Committee members, do you want to make any comments? We really appreciate your help in helping us think this through.
Are you asking for a vote at this time, or this
Yes,
will
if
be
you don't-
at the end?
You can do it now, I think.
Okay, so we're voting for the changes to these programs, to these 2 different projects?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Is there a motion that states that?
So moved.
I think that was Mark. Thank you. A second?
I second.
And John. Any discussion at all? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Stacy, is there anything else on grants that you wanted to cover?
No.
All righty. Let's move into specialty loans then. And as I mentioned, and Tina, you can put up the bill. Legislation passed last year that tweaked both the Waterman's microloan program and the Oyster Shucking House loan program. You can scroll down, Tina. And with respect, you can scroll down. All right, so the underlying language here is current law. The new language here, this is actually relating to the Oyster Shucking House loan program. Let me start there, since this is the order that the bill has for us. This is the change that I referenced, and the legislation takes effect July 1st. So we're hopeful this will allow us to be more helpful to oyster shucking houses in terms of accessing this money. So again, seasonal full-time jobs are permissible then for funding, or provide eligibility for funding. Next page, Tina. All right, stop. And then it was not clear why or how this would be reported. So we put a provision in the legislation that requires the borrowers to report to us on how many jobs they created or retained for 3 years after receiving the loan. So we're going to collect some information about that to report, presumably to the legislature. Next page, Tina. All right, now stop, Tina. Now we're into the microloan program section of the bill. I mentioned that the legislation is now open, or the eligibility for the microloans is now open to commercial watermen who fish in the Potomac River, who are licensed by the PRFC. Keep going, Tina. Stop. And here's the definition of generational watermen. Right now, only generational watermen are eligible. They're eligible for at least another year before the young watermen become eligible for this program. So you have to be a TFL licensee by DNR or a licensee by the Potomac River Fisheries Commission. Next page, Tina. And so that explains that. Next page. The bill was not drafted correctly, which is why there's the strikeouts there. And then, oops, we passed over it. Can you go back? All right, there we go. Stop. This change here on lines 12 and 13 is very important because this now gives you discretion to manage the program as you see fit. Formerly, we can only make loans between $7,000 and $15,000. As of July 1st, you can make or approve the making of loans really in any amount. So I don't have a paper on this, but I am going to propose that we allow loans to be made in this program of between $7,000 and $20,000 for equipment, and that loans over $20,000 could be made up to $30,000 for the purchase of a workboat, in addition to another up to $10,000 for equipment that is used in commercial fishing. So the change here would be $7,000 to $20,000 loans, doing what we're doing today, and then up to a $30,000 loan for the purchase of a workboat, with up to an additional $10,000 in the purchase of equipment used in commercial fishing. So in the latter case, an eligible applicant could receive up to a $40,000 loan. And then an additional recommendation I'm going to make is that there be a lifetime aggregate loan amount placed on a waterman of $40,000 in order to spread the joy around to as many watermen as possible. Right now, for a waterman applying for a loan up to $15,000, the loan is made 6 months interest only before the loan amortizes on a 4-year term. The waterman pays for the first 3 years. The last year is forgiven. The addition would be if a loan is over $20,000, it would be a 5-year term loan with the last year forgiven. So in other words, it keeps the payments more manageable by, if you're taking out more debt, a larger loan amount from us, you'd have an extra year to pay it off, and then you get that last year forgiven. So did that make sense, what I'm suggesting? And again, as is the case today, because there's really no discretion, there's no credit underwriting that's done for these. Basically, you have a credit score of at least 620. You can demonstrate that you have a majority of your commercial income from commercial fishing as demonstrated by the submission of 2 tax returns. You're eligible. And if you can't do that, you're not eligible. And we've made 43 loans so far, and we probably had more than a dozen that have been ineligible or have withdrawn for whatever reason. So this is what I'm suggesting going forward is max $20,000 loan for equipment other than a workboat, up to $30,000 to purchase a workboat, with up to $10,000 additional for equipment. And then if the loan is over $20,000, rather than a 4-year term loan, it would be a 5-year term, 5-year term loan. 6 months interest only. And I would continue to approve those based on the requirements that are outlined in actually in the statute.
Steve, this is
Yeah.
Doug. Yeah, just a quick question. Of the loans that were allowed in the 7 to 15,000 range, were they all at the bottom of the range, top of the range, the middle of the range, or
That
how was the
vast majority were 15,000. We did a couple smaller ones, couple like 12, 13,000, but everybody was asking for the max. We did have some input from prospective borrowers. I need money for a boat. This is not enough money. I need to buy a boat. And so, and we have the young watermen coming on in a year, and we know they're going to need to buy boats. So you can, I'm told, a new boat can cost 100 grand. I'm told you can get a pretty good used workboat for $35,000 to $50,000. Do you have any other insight, Doug, from your experience?
No, that's important to know that they were at the most of them were at the upper limit, so, it makes sense to raise it. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, the demand for the program was down somewhat this year. I forget what we have in the budget, Tina. So we have money to lend. We have another 500,000 coming. I actually drafted this bill 2 years ago to include this provision because I was worried about not being able to satisfy the demand. There's probably theoretically as many as 6,000 watermen who might be eligible before you get to the income issue. But I'm sorry, I take that back. 1,100 watermen who we think might be eligible. There's 6,000 total. Yeah, the demand had fallen. So I'm of a mind we want to use the money while it's available. We've got another year of funding coming. And then, of course, any money that's repaid will revolve in the program, minus the debt forgiveness in the last year of the terminal loan.
Yeah, I'm curious. I like the proposal, but I'm curious why at 7, why was that number set as the floor? If you go lower, is that a problem, or you just don't have the use or the interest at lower?
You create a lot of work.
Okay.
So it's like at some point the workload isn't worth it isn't worth the effort. So that's why the floor. We do get 3% interest in this program. So, you kind of want to make it somewhat worth your while to take the time to underwrite the loan, although the underwriting is not that difficult, as I explained.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Everybody good with what I'm suggesting?
Do you want this to be a standalone motion now?
I think so, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You want me to restate the motion?
Please.
The motion would be to approve microloans in the amount of $7,000 to $20,000 for equipment, not to include workboats, and that loans of over $20,000 may be made to include the purchase of a workboat not to exceed $30,000 in cost, plus another $10,000 in equipment, with a maximum loan not to exceed $40,000. And in addition, that there be a cumulative individual borrower cap of $40,000 for this program, and that the executive director would continue to have authority to approve these loans.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, up to the $40,000 limitation.
I'll move this motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Doug. I second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Oops. Oh, okay.
Very good. Thank
saying
you.
yes with a thumb there.
Thank you, Dan. Got it. All righty, oyster shucking house program, as I mentioned, we've approved one already. I think the change in the law is going to help a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. Not really, it hasn't been a whole lot of activity in the aquaculture programs. Nothing this year in rural energy efficiency loans. We've already approved the large animal vet loan program. We did have a automatic revolving loan request this year. The maximum loan in that program is $20,000, by the way. And I think we had 2 approvals for $20,000. And we're continuing to use the equity incentive funds from both Southern Maryland and the Upper Eastern Shore. I have had conversations with folks at Howard County. I think the Howard County government may be looking at setting up a program. I've had a conversation with Frederick County new Office of Agriculture about this. They're looking at it. So in other words, they would give us a grant that would create a fund that we would have immediately available with any core loans that we would make that would incentivize an equity contribution from the borrower to be matched by money in our equity incentive loan fund. So that concludes the discussion in that section. We're now up to the Next Generation program. Allison had a family emergency this morning. I do not know if she is available, but Tina, you have a handout, I think. Is Allison on the call?
No, she's not on, but I just put the summary that she provided.
Okay, well, here you go. You can see there on the summary sheet that we have in the option purchase program processed 56 applications since the beginning, 6 this year. 5 of them have been approved this year. Scroll down a little bit, Tina. We've had 11 option purchases that have been released, as you can see there. So we're up to 43 total that have been approved. We protected 4,211 acres in the process. You can see now in this chart there, I think we're up to 16 counties that have had at least one project with an option purchase, which is great. Happy to see that. And then with the small acreage program, that's the newer program we launched in 21, I believe. We've had 9 applications total, 1 this year. I think she's still underwriting it looks like. And we've preserved 100 acres of farmland with the 4 that have been closed. And you can see the 3 counties that have had projects. So that's the Next Gen program. As I mentioned earlier, I think we're funded for at least 3 years with the money we have in hand. And again, the option purchase money, hopefully more than half of that will be revolving. We're at the near the end of year 6 with the first projects we approved in 2018. So good news there. I apologize for the noise. The Blue Angels are practicing right over our offices right now. So if you hear that screaming jet engine noise, that's what that is. All right. So unless there are questions about that, we're up to the project acceptance report, which you all were provided. This is a list of all the projects that have been approved since the last board meeting. We want to get these projects into the official record, and it would be appropriate for a motion.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to accept the projects already being worked on, already approved and in the process?
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
I believe Steve was the second.
Was that Steve or Don?
That was AC.
That was.
Oh, sorry.
Wait, we can let someone else if they like.
No, he beat me to it.
No, AC, you're up. It's your turn. So, are there any discussion, any questions about this? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, so we're up to looking at the operating budget for FY25. Tina, do you have the loan projection spreadsheet?
Yes.
I thought we would take a quick look at the loan projection spreadsheet to see what this tells us. So we're at the last year of 18-year journey to capitalize our core programs. And if you look starting next year, this is a spreadsheet you've seen before. It gets tweaked a little bit. I upped the operating expenses a little bit to 5.4% annually in this model. But you can see that we have cash on hand today of 13.7 million, which includes, I'm sorry, it's cash plus the 2.3 million that were being appropriated. So something over 11 million today. And if you project out 6 million a year, which is our target core loan making rate each year, you can see what that looks like. So we're in good shape through 2030, carrying over perhaps $4 million or so, which we would have available to lend in subsequent years. We're going to plan to redo this model, take it to 2036, and we're going to take a good hard look at all the underlying assumptions in the model. And my proposal would be is to bring this to the programs committee in the fall, so that when you all meet again in January or early February, you'll have the best thinking available. The General Assembly has taken some interest in this as well, so they'll probably be curious as to how we look going forward as well. So that's a work project for us to do later in the summer. But right now, I think we're clearly on track to be able to handle what's coming over the next 6 years for sure. And when you see the operating budget, I hope you've had a chance to look at it. You see I've highlighted in green the core incentive grant making dollar amounts. And that's the dollar figure, or very close to it, in the current proposed operating budget for fiscal 25. I think we're going to have to take a harder look at it, not in 25, because I think we need to do what I'm proposing next year, but thereafter we're probably going to need to think a little more little harder about the money we just give away and don't recover, from a debt obligation, from a loan. So I just point that out because we're getting to that point now where we're going to be self-sustaining after next year. But so this is, I think gives you a sense as to where we are right now, that we should be able to handle the loan demand at the $6 million sort of average level that we've had in recent years. So Tina, if you'll take that down, unless there are questions. Yeah,
Steve, do you feel that your overall assumptions err on the conservative side, or not err, but are?
Yeah, I think they're conservative. I think they're conservative in the first two columns with like 3% loan losses, and 5.4% might be closer to reality in recent 2 or 3 years. I don't know if that's high, but this is a conservative model. But we really want to scrub it, and then we want to look at another at least till 2036, and you see what it looks like. Now, of course, the longer you go out into the future, probably the more inaccurate the model becomes, right? Because you have a small error, it sort of multiplies over time. But we'll have another discussion about this in the future, I'm sure, and we'll see where we are. You know, the intent is to try to be self-sustaining going forward. You know, forever, you know, in perpetuity is a long time, forever is a long time. I certainly think that there may be opportunities for the legislature to continue to fund, like as it has been, specialty grant and loan programs, right? So things that they want to do, or if they want to have us, you know, continue certain grant programs, you know, we may go to them and say, hey, we need, you know, $400,000 for a livestock processing loan program, you know, 5 years from now or something. Not loan, grant program. Or maybe a loan program that's highly targeted to some particular need at that point in time. But I think in terms of doing our core loan activities, at the average amount we would realistically do in a given year, I think we're on track. At least that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. And maybe going forward, when you go out that far, maybe you should have, you know, 2 or 3 scenarios instead of just one where you're, you know, maybe early loan payoffs, you're isolating that as in a different, or, you know, whatever you think the key components are, just have some different scenarios so that you get a flavor for, like you say, if I'm off a little bit here, what does that do over 10 years?
Right.
A sensitivity analysis, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. We will endeavor to do that. And, you know, you can make this as complicated as you want. I mean, you can build in, because there's a lot of moving parts in this model. But we'll certainly do that. We used to run, you know, projections at, you know, 5 million, 5.5 million, 6.5 million, 7 million. We can do that too. But that's a good point. We'll build some different scenarios and see what it looks like. All right. Getting now onto the operating budget summary, Tina. So as I mentioned, we're carrying over $11.2 million into the projected budget for next year. We've got 2.3 million in new core programs appropriations. We've got the aggregation program funding in there. We're projecting a loan principal repayment of 2.1 million. That is right out of portfolio. So that's what we have booked. We know we're going to probably have another 1 million, 2.5 million if history repeats itself in early loan repayments, but you know, we can't project that with any certainty, so it's not there. At just under $400,000 in specialty loan repayments. We're projecting about 1.6 million in interest incomes from loans. It's just a little over what we have booked right now. We've cut in half the program income. Reason for that is we're going from an environment where we're collecting a 1% loan origination fee on our core loans. A good number of our core loans in the future are going to come from loan participations. And right now we're not charging a loan origination fee. So that's a difference. So we're going to see a revenue loss there. You can see there that we're not anticipating any next generation appropriation next year. I think we're good based on what the monies we have available for about 3 years. You see some repayment monies projected for next year based on discussions with Allison about what you think is going to come in. Of the 7 next generation projects, option purchase projects we did in fiscal 2018, 4 have now repaid, 3 have not, but 2 are expected to. So we'll only quote unquote lose money on one of them. We actually haven't lost money. That money has gone to purchase or will purchase a permanent conservation easement on that farm property. So it's not like a loss. We just aren't getting repaid because some other agency like MALP for county or rural legacy hasn't taken us out by paying the next gen farmer more than what we paid, the 51% of fair market value of the land. And then we've got funding in there for the livestock processing, WIPI, and Water's microloan program. So that's the on the income side. And I should note the operating income there, we're projecting 1.856 million at the end of the fiscal year 24. And then we're projecting out 1.8 million in operating income for next year. If you looked at projected operating expenditures, you can see that we're at 1.5 million for this year, which is obviously well under the 1.85 million we're projecting. But you look at the budget for next year, 1.8 million versus just under 1.7 million. You can see what I was talking about. We're going to have to take a harder look at our core program grant making going forward, because there's only a difference there of $120,000. So that's something we're going to need to think about. Again, I'm not worried about this year. I'm more want to be more thoughtful about it beginning of fiscal 2026. So there's the budget, 20.3 billion in revenues available and 20.3 billion in in expenditures. You also have the detail on all that as well. In terms of the core programs, we're plugging in 7.5 million for Mr. Biff, 700,000 for agribusiness equipment, 240,000 each for forestry and forestry equipment working capital and the vineyard, hop yard, orchard planning loan programs, and $800,000 for the new large animal vet program. So that's all part of that core loan programs that totals to $8.68 million there on the screen. In terms of the specialty loan programs, you can see there we're budgeting a fair amount for the shellfish aquaculture loan program, for example. We're budgeting the entirety of $1,640,000 for the Waterman's microloan program, and smaller amounts for the other smaller specialty loan programs. So that's specialty, and then we have the specialty grant programs funded at various amounts, including 1.14 million for the Certified Local Farm Enterprise Food Aggregation Grant Program. And then finally, we budgeted for both the Option Purchase Next Gen program as well as the SANG program, $3.4 million. So that's what the proposal is for next year. Obviously, based on what we did this year, it's not likely we're going to get to 20 billion in expenditures by the end of the year, but we're prepared to if everything goes very well. So happy to take questions, and then we'll take a motion if it's appropriate.
Is there a motion to accept the proposed operating budget?
So moved.
Thank you. I didn't catch who that was. I hope you did.
Mark.
Mark, thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, John. Is there any discussion, any further questions for Steve or any of our other staff? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Okay, as I mentioned at the outset, I think we're going to want to get the planning committee together, which is actually our programs committee in the fall. So, if you're interested in that, please become engaged in that discussion. We'll send out material as it becomes available on that. So, good time to get back to thinking about the longer term. In terms of an update on other things we've been involved with, I'm happy to report that we are now officially out of providing support in any formal way for the Maryland Market Money Program. We wrapped up the last grant with Montgomery County government in February, and we, of course, we turned everything over. We thought to the Farms and Food Access for Resilient Maryland Foundation, otherwise known as the Farmed Foundation, which we created a year and a half ago. That nonprofit is doing, I think, pretty well. Officially launched. It's got a great part-time executive director in Vanessa Finney, who some of you may know. She's also involved with the nursery landscape industry. Doing a fabulous job. I am off the board officially and I'm serving as an advisor. I want to thank MDA. MDA has taken over as the fiscal intermediary for the program, which is still being run by the Southern Maryland Ag Development Commission. And so I think everything is going well in that regard. Just to comment on the Food System Resiliency Council, which was created 3 years ago. It has been a real time consumer for yours truly, but I think we're in a pretty good place. The council is now formally and officially housed at the Maryland Emergency Management Administration, and they just hired a new full-time coordinator there. They spend probably 80% of their council's time discussing food access and food distribution issues, food pantries, food nutrition benefits, all manner of issues around that. And then maybe 20% of the full council's time and roughly half of the Environment and Production Committee's time is spent on production agriculture related issues. That has consumed a lot of my time. I'm delighted to report Secretary Addix has become very engaged, and many other members of the department are now becoming engaged in those conversations. So things are going well there now, and hopefully my time will not be quite as needed as it has been in the past. In my first year with the council, I participated in 44 meetings, including some day-long meetings, and I missed 3 or 4 due to being away. So it's been a pretty time-intensive effort. But things seem to be on a pretty good trajectory right now. That's really all I wanted to talk about. You do have the staff time analysis that we sent out to you. You've received other information in different ways. So is there anything of a general nature before we go into closed session that anybody would like to ask about? Any announcements that you would like the public to be aware of?
I guess I can say this now. I just want to thank Steve McHenry for visiting the city of Crisfield and presenting to a group of our business and government officials on MARBIDCO. Of course, my apologies. I found out that our watermen were working late that evening, so I'm probably going to redo the meeting in the fall when they aren't working as late. But I definitely appreciate your presence. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me down. It was great to be able to talk to some of your your local business folks. The University of
Bill.
Maryland Eastern Shore folks were there as well. I think they appreciated learning more about MARBIDCO's programs. And as I mentioned, Brittany Rawlings, who handles our aquaculture and watermen's programs, would be happy to come down and meet with your local watermen.
Great.
Well,
Appreciate it.
yeah, we've been pretty busy on the outreach front, as we generally are. And we're certainly going to have a lot of outreach to do, especially now the commercial lenders, as we launch the new loan participation program. All right. So unless there are no other questions or announcements, Madam Chair, we can contemplate going into closed session using the usual protocol.
Okay, do I hear a motion to move into a closed session pursuant to the applicable provisions of General Provisions Article Section 305B of the Annotated Code of Maryland?
Let me get it right this month, because I messed up last month. And yes, I move.
Okay, AC is moving that we consider matters that concern proposals for a business or industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state, to consider the investment of public funds, and to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Any discussion? I thank everyone for their participation and their attendance at the meeting. And
Madam
yes.
Chair, I'm going to add, we're going to adjourn the meeting thereafter as an addendum to that motion.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I missed that.
No worries.
Yeah. All right. After we're finished with the closed meeting, it will be adjourned. Sarah did second. Is there any further any other things that we've missed? Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you very much. We're